All right, we're in chapter 11 of the book of Joshua, and I really didn't think about it 2 weeks ago when we were here. We're going to try to actually do chapters 11 and 12 because chapter 12, and we'll talk about it when we get to it, but it really just lists all the kings and the kingdoms that the Israelites conquered. So, but we're going to do chapters 11 and 12 tonight.
Tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Did I miss the picture?
Yeah, you wasn't here last.
Oh,
We did chapter 10
That's right.
last time we were.
okay.
All right. And, you know, we've seen a lot of conquering and a lot of destruction to this point. But they were doing exactly what God had told them to do and how God told them to carry it out. And now they're, you know, up through chapter 10, they were pretty much taking care of what was on the other side of Jordan and then the southern areas of the land of Canaan. And now here in this chapter, they're turning to the northern kingdoms, and they're going to be able to take care of it pretty much all at one time. And there's a reason for that, and we'll see here in a minute. But it begins here in chapter 11, verse 1, and it says, "And it came to pass when Jabin, king of Hazor, had heard those things, that he sent to Jobab, king of Madon, and to the king of Shimron, and to the king of Ashaph, and to the kings that were on the north of the mountains, and of the plain south of Chinneroth, and in the valley, and in the borders of Dor on the west." So, all of these folks in the north. This one king, Jabin, he must be kind of like the go-to person for all these northern kingdoms in the land of Canaan. Because he comes together and he's going to get all of these folks together to come against the Israelites. And as I was studying this and looking at what God's Word said here, it reminded me of how, you know, with the United States, when we have trouble somewhere in the world, we can go to our allies, and they're pretty much, most every one of them normally are usually ready to help us in whatever we've got to go against. Now, we have had a few times where some didn't want to, but eventually they got involved. But that's what it kind of reminded me of. Jabin, you know, he began to call out to all these other kings to gather all of the northern kings together to go against the Israelites. And the reason he was doing that, he had heard of what Joshua had done on the other side of Jordan, and he had heard what he had done in the southern part of the land of Canaan. How that he had destroyed pretty much everything. And, you know, some areas he burnt the complete cities, killed everything that was alive. And in other cities, they were able to keep some of the buildings and the animals and the gold and silver, but they killed everybody. So, and then there was one that they conquered. God told them they could divide up the spoil, or what they had taken, amongst all the people of Israel. But most every occasion, except with that one group of people that came and lied to Joshua, and said, hey, you know, they made their clothes look all raggedy, and they used molded bread. Said, yeah, we've traveled such a long distance here. We've heard about y'all. We know your God's the only God. And so they made a covenant with them when actually they were part of the Canaanite people, or the people that lived in Canaan. They only lived 2 or 3, 4 miles away from them. And when they found out, it upset Joshua, but he said, you know what? We've made a covenant with them, and we're going to keep that covenant. So now, Jabin's heard about all these things, so he's gathering up all these northern kings. Let's go fight them. And he says in verse 3, "And to the Canaanite on the east and on the west, and to the Amorite, and the Hittite, and the Pizarite, and the Jebusite in the mountains, and to the Hivite under Hermon in the land of Mizpeh. And they went out, they and all their hosts with them, much people, even as the sand that is upon the seashore, in multitude, with horses and chariots, very many. So, they had a huge army coming up against the Israelites. But, it doesn't matter how big an obstacle you face. If God's on your side, you're going to win every time. Now, a lot of times, we kind of get like King David's brothers and the rest of Israel when they were in the valley there, and they kept seeing old Goliath over there. They were all scared to go battle him. But when that little boy got there, David, hey, I'll fight him. But he knew that God was going to fight the battle. He knew God would take care of it. And he went out with just a sling, and he picked up 5 rocks out of a brook. Now, there's speculation on why he picked up 5. They said, well, Goliath had 4 brothers. I don't know. All he needed was 1. Because when he got that sling going and he slung it out there and he hit Goliath, it killed him, hit him right between the eyes. Just caved in his forehead. So he trusted God even though he was small and Goliath was huge. Just Goliath's shield that he carried probably weighed more than David did. But David trusted God. Now, all of this multitude, in verse 4, we saw that this is much people. Even as the sand that's upon the seashore in multitude, they had horses and chariots, very many. So they had a pile of them. If these folks are like the sands on the seashore, that's a bunch of them. But when you trust God, if we trust Him, we shouldn't worry about how huge it is. God's going to win every time. So He shares. And when all these kings were met together, they came and pitched together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. And the Lord said unto Joshua, be not afraid because of them, for tomorrow about this time will I deliver them up all slain before Israel. Thou shalt halt their horses and burn their chariots with fire, or do something to the hamstring of the horses, is what haul means. But God is telling Joshua, don't be worried. Don't be afraid of this huge number that's camped out here waiting on you. About this time tomorrow, I'm going to deliver them in your hand. If we'll trust God, no matter what Satan throws at us, I mean, we may get beaten and battered, and it seems like sometimes we're just not going to make it. But if we'll hold on to Jesus, we're going to make it. There's no doubt. God didn't want His people to have any doubt. He told Joshua, be not afraid because of them. I keep thinking, as I study through the book of Joshua, I keep thinking what God told Joshua in the very first chapter. Be not afraid, be of good courage. Because God knew what they were going to face was going to look enormous. But no matter how big it is, God's bigger. If we won't be afraid, if we'll be courageous. There's a song we sing once in a while. It's been a long time since we sang it, I think. But in this song, it shares about that God doesn't want a coward in His service. We can't wilter down to Satan. We can't wilt down because a problem looks huge. If we'll just face it head on and go forward, God's able to take care of it. And that's what he wanted Joshua to do. Don't be afraid. Don't worry about it. I'm going to deliver them up to you slain before Israel. So Joshua came and all the people of war with him against them by the waters of Merom suddenly, and they fell upon them. So here comes Joshua. They come up. They come up to the waters of Merom, where all these that are so many of them, they're like the sand on the seashore in multitude, bunches of horses and chariots, and he comes up on them and he really takes them by surprise. He really jumps on them. And the Lord delivered them into the hand of Israel, who smote them and chased them unto great Zidon, and unto Mizramoth Maim, and unto the valley of Mizpeh eastward, and they smote them until they left them none remaining. Now, see, if David or if Joshua hadn't have listened to God, when they went up against this huge number of people, and they had wilted down because they were such a great number, then they would have probably got spanked. But he comes up against them with encouragement, because God said, don't be afraid of them. I'm going to deliver them into your hand. And he comes up suddenly on them, and he begins the battle, and God delivers all these people to him. He has to chase them. He's got to run them down. But now they were a huge number of folks. God delivered them into the Israelites' hands. And they chased them several miles across Canaan until there was not one of them remaining. So that pretty much took care of pretty much all of the folks that they needed to take care of in the land of Canaan. Now it's pretty much theirs. They had already taken care of, and I'm going to show you a map here in a minute. They had already taken care of the folks in the southern kingdom, and all these they're working on here are in the northern area of Canaan. And Joshua did unto them as the Lord bade him. He hoed their horses and burnt their chariots with fire. So, you know, it pays to follow God's instructions. God had told Joshua exactly what to do. You know, I find even today in our lives, if we'll follow what God says, things will work out. Things will be done correctly. Things will be done that will gain our God glory and honor. And Joshua at that time turned back and took Hazor, and smote the king thereof with the sword, for Hazor before time was the head of all those kingdoms. So, you know, here Jabin, king of Hazor, he was the head honcho. He was the head man that got all these kingdoms together, all these folks, men of war together, and came against Israel, and they were in number as the sands of the sea. Look what God did for them. Seemed to be a huge problem out there before them, but because they trusted God, because they agreed with Joshua with what God had said, God's going to take care of this. God's going to deliver this into our hands. And that's exactly what God had done. And they smote all the souls that were therein with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them. there was not any left to breathe, and he burnt Hazor with fire. So here is another city. He burns the whole city with fire. Destroys it. Now, and you know, God had a reason for those things. These people were a people that worshiped anything and everything. God didn't want them following the ways of these people. God didn't want them to fall in line with what they were worshiping. So God had them to just destroy everything and all the people. He left none breathing. Not one. And all the cities of those kings and all the kings of them did Joshua take and smote them with the edge of the sword, and he utterly destroyed them as Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded. Because now, even back when Moses was kind of training Joshua, he told him, you know, you're going to come up and you're going to battle. It's back in the book of Numbers. You're going to have to do exactly what God says. You're going to have to destroy everything he says to destroy. Because some of the battles that we're going to read about in chapter 12 was actually completed when Moses was still alive. Because they defeated some on the other side of Jordan before they ever crossed the Jordan. But Moses had commanded, because God had shared with him what to tell Joshua. But as for the cities that stood still in their strength, Israel burned none of them, save Hazor only, that did Joshua burn. And all the spoil of these cities and the cattle the children of Israel took for a prey unto themselves, but every man they smote with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them, neither left they any to breathe. So they didn't leave any person. But now here again, all these northern cities that these folks has come out against them, they burned that one city, Hazor, but then they took everything else, all the possessions, the animals, the cattle, the lambs, the goats, whatever was there, they took for themselves and divided it among Israel. You know, here a few weeks back, we saw the same thing where God allowed them to take what was left in the city after everyone was destroyed. He allowed them to take that spoil and divide it among the people. So, you know, they're gaining, not only are they gaining a homeland, but they're gaining wealth in this homeland. You know, before they went into this land, when they sent the first spies in there, they told them it was a land flowing with milk and honey. Because there was going to be vineyards here that they didn't have to plant. There's going to be wells here they didn't have to dig. There were going to be homes here that they didn't have to build. They were going to gain all this stuff. And that's what they're doing. They're taking it. Because God had given it to them. And now, I think we had this discussion a couple of weeks back, maybe a little further back than that. You know, it seems kind of harsh. But, you know, while Israel was slaves in Egypt, God had given these people, because God's not a respecter of person. God had given these people over 400 years to turn from their wickedness, and when they didn't, God allowed them to be destroyed. And, you know, that's coming again. People that will not turn from wickedness, they're going to face destruction. If they die in that wickedness, they're going to face the wrath of God. They're going to face, hearing the words, "Depart from me, I never knew you." They're going to lift their eyes in a lake of fire. How awful. But it's all because that folks sometimes would rather follow evil than good. And we're right in the midst of that in our own world today. As the Lord commanded Moses his servant, so did Moses command Joshua, and so did Joshua. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses. So everything that had been shared with Moses had been shared with him that they needed to do. Moses had passed it on to Joshua. Then Moses died. God buried Moses. I heard a preacher this past weekend. He was talking about Moses, and he was talking about how that he's the only person that ever walked to his own funeral, because God allowed him to come up high on a mountain and see the promised land, and then that's the last they saw of Moses. God buried him after that. So he walked to his own burial. He walked to his own funeral. And God took care of it. God buried him because he didn't want anybody following and worshiping Moses. So, but everything that God had shared with Moses, Moses did, and that needed to be shared with Joshua, he shared, and Joshua did that was shared with him. And he took care of all those things that God told him to do. So Joshua took all that land, the hills, and all the south country, and all the land of Goshen, and the valley, and the plain, and the mountain of Israel, and the valley of the same, even from the Mount Halak that goeth up to Seir, even unto Baal-gad, in the valley of Lebanon, under Mount Hermon, and all their kings he took and smote them and slew them. So everything that God had laid out for them to take, they had done exactly that. Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. It didn't take just an overnight battle. It took quite some time. Here's a map. You may not can see it real well, but here's a map of Israel and the travels of Joshua. When they came into the land, they came in just north of the Dead Sea, and they came in and came across and went southward. And once they had completed all this, then they went northward, and that's what we read about tonight. So the southward trek was from chapters 1 through 10. All this took place in chapters 1 through 10. Them coming up to the Jordan and then crossing over. And then they began all the battles that they were taking and completing that God had laid out for them. Once they'd completed all those southward, they went north. They took all the land that God had given to them. From the Mediterranean Sea to a good bit the other side of the Dead Sea. Now, they don't have all that land today. All they have is from the Jordan River pretty much over to the Mediterranean. But it's always amazed me, and I like to think about, I think I've mentioned it before. You know, the Jordan River runs down through here, and it runs into the Dead Sea. The Jordan River is fresh water. When you run into the Dead Sea, that's the saltiest water in the world. There's so much salt in that water, you can just lay back on the water and float. There's so much salt in it, salt deposit wash up on the shore. You can look at pictures, live pictures on the internet. There'll be salt mounds this tall all along the shore of the Dead Sea. But it's fresh water flowing into it. That amazes me. But You know, God's good. God can do what He wants. But those are the tricks of Joshua and the Israelite people. And then I have this map, and this may be getting kind of a little bit ahead, but this map, and I'm sorry it's pink instead of blue. My ink cartridge was about out, and it printed pink instead of blue for water. But this shows where all the tribes were at. And we're here in just another week or so, we're going to get into where they're dividing the land for the Israelites, for each of the tribes. And it shows the 2.5 tribes are on the other side of Jordan, and then all the other tribes are on the other side of Jordan, so where they've just completed destroying everybody. All right, we're going to kind of read through chapter 12, and then we're going to talk about it because it really just lists all the kings. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. But when we get to chapter 12, when we get to chapter 12, we're going to just read through it and then we're going to discuss it, because it just lists off some of the things that the people that they defeated. Verse 19. There was not a city that made peace with the children of Israel save the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. All other they took in battle. So that one place, those were the ones that came and deceived them. They'd made the covenant with them, and they weren't going to break that covenant. For it was of the Lord to harden their hearts, that they should come against Israel in battle, that He might destroy them utterly, and that they might have no favor, but that He might destroy them as the Lord commanded Moses. At that time came Joshua and cut off the Anakims from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua destroyed them utterly with their cities. So all these folks, whether it was in the mountains or whether it was on flat ground, he went, all the Israelite army went, and they destroyed all that God had told them to destroy. There was none of the Anakims left in the land of the children of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod there remained. So Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord said unto Moses, and Joshua gave it for an inheritance unto Israel, according to their divisions by their tribes, and the land rested from war. And then we're going to get into the divisions and all this kind of stuff later. But, you know, God was going to tell them how to divide it. The different size tribes, they would get, everybody was going to get, it wasn't going to be like everybody's going to get 20 acres apiece. Because some tribes were a lot bigger than others. So, but it was going to average out to where the families in each of these tribes would basically get about the same amount of land. And then that would make it to where each tribe, one tribe may have more land than another tribe, but it's because it was a bigger tribe. So, but it still would work out to where that it was fair. And because our God is nothing but fair, so, in all that He does. But in everything that Joshua did in coming and stepping up to the plate as God had called him, he did everything that God told him, and look how God blessed him. One battle where they got out of the will of God and they got spanked and sent back home. And that's when they first went to Ai, one of the, maybe the second battle. It was the first battle after Jericho. That's a little old bitty place. 2,000 or 3,000 men we can send down there. And, but they didn't, in all that, you didn't read anything about them asking God what God wanted to do. They got spanked and sent back home. When they got in line with God, God told Joshua, take all of your men of war down there. Not just 2,000 or 3,000. Take all of them down there. And when they went the second time, they took it. So when they got in line with God, everything fell right in place. You know what? Same thing happens in our lives today. if we'll get in line with God, I'm not saying things won't happen, because they will. But the things of God in our lives will fall right in place if we'll keep Him first, if we'll follow what He says. So, you know, it's important to follow what God says.
I think God's still helping the Israelites out, and to this day, the smallest countries it is, none of those bigger countries has been able to overthrow them yet. They've
Yeah.
always been able to push them back.
And it was tried back in, what, 1967?
Egypt, yeah.
The several Arab countries come up against them, and they were in war for 6 days, and
6, 7,
Israel had whipped them and took more land and sent them all home. But, you know, God will fight for His people. So, if we get in line with God and follow what He says, sometimes we don't want to do what He says, and we miss out on a lot of blessings. You know, no matter what it is, if we'll do what God says, it's like, and this is kind of similar. I heard a preacher here a week or two ago, and I told Sonia that Sunday morning, I said, this is kind of rare to hear a preacher say this, especially one that's on TV. He said that he had a church call him, wanted to know what it was going to cost him for him to come preach at their church. He said, nothing. And I trust God. Whatever God wants me to do, that's what I'm going to do. But he began to share in his testimony that him and his wife, he said that they had a vehicle that they couldn't afford, and that God told them to get rid of it, and he said they got rid of it. And said they had a $700 car. And he said it was anointed every time they got in it, that hoping and praying they'd make it to where they needed to go. And he said it never failed them. He said, God told us to give away our house. He said, we gave away our house. And he said, but God has never failed us when we'll get in line with Him, with whatever He tells us to do. God will bless. And that's what He had done for His people here. They had gotten in line with Him. God took care of them. They're battling here in this chapter 11, a group of people that were as the sand of the sea shore.
I know that's true, but, and maybe this is stupid, but I feel like I'm in the will of God. I feel like you're in the will of God. And I'm not saying God doesn't bless us, but I don't see how deeper we can get. You know what I'm saying? I mean, sometimes I feel like, God, where are you? Because I feel like He's just forsaken us.
But He hadn't, because He always comes through.
Yeah?
I'm not saying there's not times we won't be discouraged. And even if you read about Job, he was discouraged, but he never lost sight of God.
I think we all get like that, you know, wonder where He's at a lot of times. And you got your faith in Him, and it seems like nothing is just coming. You know, you just caught it in limbo.
I always say we're either doing something really, really good or doing something really, really bad. Both. I tell you.
We're going to make it, though.
But you know, if you don't never go through anything, no, you won't never put any
Well, that's
faith in what God can do.
Yes.
That's it.
But I want Him just to give me a little bit of
Hey,
leeway.
hey, He does, so every day.
That's true.
You know it?
Every day.
And you don't
You
take
hit the
it.
nail on the head.
Believe me, we all get to walk through some things. Everybody gets to know about some of the things we walk through in life, but, you know, without those things, you know, it wouldn't draw us closer to Him. And I can honestly sit here and tell you that, you know, because when you start giving up everything and living for the Lord, I mean, you can bet that the devil's at work.
Yeah.
And the harder you wanna, put your faith in God, the harder Satan is. He knows where all of our weaknesses are. And I can only talk about myself. He knows where I'm weak at. And buddy, he snatches and jerks me around every day sometime, but I'm still.
Still kicking back.
I tried to shave all my hair off so he can't grab much hair. He just grab him by the shirt tail, so I
Maybe
get
I need
you.
to do that.
Maybe you need to do that, Clarence.
It don't help. You walk around and look like you ain't got no hair then. I'm telling you, boy, Satan.
Just grabbed
He
and
would.
snatched all of mine
So
out.
like I say, but as Christians, if we don't walk through some things, then it's gonna be too easy.
It's that valley.
Yeah, cause that's where
But
all
I
the
just feel
growth
like
is,
I'm
that's
in
where
the
all the growth
valley
is.
all the time. I hate to be like
He's got
that, but
something for you.
I
to do, Harry.
feel that. I mean, I
That's-
feel like
that's-
that.
You're on a treasure.
And I've shared this story in messages before here at our church and at other places too. You know, I read a story one time about a mountain climber, and he shared he loved getting to that top, but he said when he got on the top, he'd always look back down. He said the greenery was always down in the valley down. He said it was just green as gold. He said that's where all the growth was at. And he used that to share that in our lives. When we're in the valley, that's really when we're trusting God the most. And that's when we can really get ourselves in line with God. And that's where we're going to grow. It's like Brother Terry said, if we don't go through things, it's like the song that I really love this song. I listen to it quite often. God, Lord, don't move this mountain. Because in that song it says, God, if you were to move every mountain, I'd grow weaker every time. And that's what would happen.
And that's true, but I like when you move one just once in a
Long
while.
after you see
And,
what's
you
going
know,
on.
and think about it like this too, he's always preparing us for something greater. And here's the end. If we have faith in Him, believe in this Bible, He's really trying to prepare us for a home not here on earth.
That's
And
true.
He's trying to prepare us to get our minds off of this stuff that we
Amen.
all think we need, and understand that the real stuff that we need is right here in Him, and placing our faith in Him, so then we can go out and be an example and let our light shine, because right now in this world, the light needs to be great, because weakness is going to grow greater, I believe, just because of what all is going on, because you see Christians just falling apart daily.
Amen.
Not standing up for what's right, and not voicing where we should voice, and because we think, well, God's got this, He don't need us, but He really does. He needs us to stand up and be that good example wherever we at in life. And then, hey, we're going through some stuff, even get stronger in Him instead of being strong in ourselves, because we mighty weak as people. I guarantee you, we in the flesh.
Yeah.
I know I am. I'm in the flesh right now, but my hope is in God. And I just believe with all my heart, He's just preparing all of us for something greater. Now, what that may be, I don't know. Because yours maybe is a lot different than mine, I don't know what. But
Somebody told me the other day, sometimes what you're going through has nothing to do with you, it's who's watching you. It's somebody else that needs, it's not always,
We'd be a blessing for
it's
somebody
not
else.
always about what you're going through. It's you're going through it, but it's a blessing for somebody else. Somebody else is gaining something from your situation.
Well, that could be true.
Us being in the flesh like we are, like Brother Terry said, us being in the flesh, sometimes we don't think God is working fast enough for us.
Yeah, I think that's
That's a lot of our problems
I
right
think
there.
that's it
We
right
don't
there.
think He's working fast enough.
We're
I don't
an
even
instant,
take
we're an
the
instant
computer.
generation.
Mission.
We don't all cook grits like Brother Laverne does, and we want them instant grits. Sonia
Every
fixes her
morning.
some every morning. Takes her about a minute or so, and she's got a big old bowl of grits. But now Brother Laverne on Sunday mornings when we have a breakfast here, he'll start them at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and he's cooking them all the way to 7:30. Adding a little water, stirring with that whisk, and out of all the breakfasts, I believe we have the best
Yeah, 'cause
breakfast.
everybody compliments the cousins, we have everybody compliment on our grits.
You had a good teacher, had you, baby? Oh, maybe it was good. I hadn't tasted his grits.
All right, we're gonna read through chapter 12, and if you need me to stop me, but we're gonna try to just read through it, because it lists off the ones that Moses defeated with Israel and the ones that Joshua defeated with Israel in the Canaan. Chapter 12, verse 1. Now these are the kings of the land which the children of Israel smote and possessed their land on the other side Jordan toward the rising of the sun from the river Arnon unto Mount Hermon and all the plain on the east. Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and ruled from Aor, which is upon the bank of the river Arnon, and from the middle of the river, and from half Gilead, even unto the river Jabbok, which is the border of the children of Ammon, and from the plain to the sea of Chinneroth on the east, and unto the sea of the plain, even the salt sea on the east, the way to Beshemath, and from the south unto Ashdod Pisgah. And the coast of Og, king of Bashan, which was of the remnant of the giants that dwelt at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, and reigned in Mount Hermon, and in Salcah, and in Bashan, unto the border of the Geshurites, and the Maccathites, and half Gilead, and the border of Sihon, king of Heshbon. Them did Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the children of Israel smite, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave it for a possession unto the Reubenites, and the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. And it shows, I may get Sister Lynn to make a copy of this, and you can see on the other side of Jordan, Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. So, and those were the ones that Moses, along with Israel, defeated. Now the ones that Joshua, along with Israel, defeated. And these are the kings of the country which Joshua and the children of Israel smote on this side of Jordan, on the west from Baal-gad, in the valley of Lebanon, even unto the Mount Halak, that goeth up to Seir, which Joshua gave it to the tribes of Israel for possession, according to their divisions, in the mountains, and in the valleys, and in the plains, and in the springs, and in the wilderness, and in the south country, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The king of Jericho won. The king of Ai, which is beside Bethel, won. The king of Jerusalem won. The king of Hebron won. The king of Jarmuth won. The king of Lachish won. The king of Eglon won. The king of Gezer won. The king of Debir won. The king of Geder won. The king of Hormah won. The king of Arad won. The king of Libnah won. The king of Adullam won. The king of Makkedah won. The king of Bethel won. The king of Tappuah won. The king of Hepher won. The king of Aphek won. The king of Lasharon won. The king of Madon won. The king of Hazor won. The king of Shem-Ron-Memron won. The king of Akshaph won. The king of Taanach won. The king of Megiddo won. The king of Kadesh won. The king of Jokanam of Carmel won. The king of Dor and the coast of Dor won. The king of the nations of Gilgal won. The king of Tisrar won. All the kings 30-1. So all of them that they defeated, 31 kings and their armies, the only way they could do that was to trust God. There was no other way. For the army of Israel, with no more experience than they had, but God had told them way back when they were traveling around the wilderness to take the men of valor, those that were able to fight. He told them the ages. But to come up against an army that is like the sand of the sea, and defeat them, the only way they could do that is with God's help. So that chapter, even though it seems kind of, why would God even have that in it? It really shows that God's people were trusting Him. That's the only way they could have defeated all 31 of these kings and their armies. No other way. So that chapter really tells me that we need to trust God in everything we do. Everything. We need to seek His guidance and His wisdom in everything that we do, every decision that we make. That we be led of Him, and then the outcome will be like it was here. They defeated every one of them. Anybody have anything on these two chapters? Any questions, comments?